The stranger's smile looked harmless enough until the phone rang 10 nights later. Elena Morris still remembers the drive that changed every rule she once trusted. It was the autumn of 1999. She was 31, generous to a fault, and making a 3-hour haul from her hometown of Briar Hollow to bustling Metro City for a routine supply run. Early dusk painted the highway silver when she spotted him, a lone figure trudging along the shoulder, thumb raised, duffel bag slung low. Elena's friends often teased that her heart was bigger than her sense of caution. True to form, she braked near mile marker 67, leaned across the passenger seat and called out, "Need a lift?" The man, late 30s, lean, polite to the point of nervousness, nodded gratefully, introduced himself only as Cal, and slipped inside. He buckled up, eyes down, voice soft. For the first hour, the miles melted beneath easy small talk. He spoke of odd jobs that had dried up, of a sister he hoped to visit, of cash that had run out days earlier. Elena, sensing genuine hardship, offered to buy dinner when they reached a rest stop cafe called the Lantern Inn. Cal protested, cheeks flushed crimson, but hunger won. Over greasy fries and burnt coffee, they chatted about music, hometown memories, and the kind of future each still hoped for. The fluorescent bulbs hung overhead outside. Night gathered like a held breath. Back on the road, city lights finally smeared the windshield. Cal asked to be dropped near the Financial District bus depot. Before climbing out, he hesitated, then said, "You're different. Can I call you sometime, just to let you know I'm okay?" Elena scribbled her number on a receipt, wished him luck, and watched him disappear into a river of neon and taillights. 10 days passed. At 2:17 a.m., Elena's phone shrilled, jerking her from sleep. A payphone echo filled the line, followed by Cal's urgent whisper. "Listen carefully. When I stepped into your car that evening, I'd decided something terrible. I was going to rob Umabi Wurs when we stopped for food. I'd figured no one would connect it, bro. Drifter to a woman found miles down the interstate, but you were kind. You smiled. You treated me like I mattered, and I couldn't do it." His voice cracked. "Promise me something, Elena. Never pick up another hitchhiker. Not everyone will change their mind." The line went dead. Redialing only reached the hollow tone of an abandoned booth. Elena never saw Cal again, but the memory is carved deeper than any scar. Whenever she passes that lonely stretch of highway, her stomach knots with the thought of how near kindness came to disaster and the chilling mercy that let her drive away. Some decisions haunt you forever. Mine was stopping for a hitchhiker on a rain-soaked night in March. The clock on my dashboard read 3:17 a.m. as I navigated the winding curves of Riverside Drive, just outside the sleepy town of Cedarbrook. It was a Tuesday night, or rather, early Wednesday morning, and the kind of spring storm that makes you question why you're out on the road at all was lashing my windshield. I'd been working a double shift at the Northgate Medical Center and was bone-tired, eager to get back to my apartment on Elm Street. This stretch of road was notorious for being deserted, flanked by towering pines and the occasional farmhouse whose windows glowed like distant stars. The speed limit was 45, but I was pushing 60, wanting nothing more than to collapse into bed. Then I saw him. A figure emerged from the shadows near the old millstone bridge, thumb extended, hood pulled low against the driving rain. My headlights caught him for just a moment, a man who looked to be in his early 30s, wearing a dark green jacket and black cargo pants. Something about his posture, the way he stood perfectly still despite the downpour, made my skin crawl. My rational mind screamed to keep driving, but some misplaced sense of compassion made me slow down. Maybe he's stranded, I thought. Maybe his car broke down. I pulled over and rolled down my window just enough to speak. "Where are you headed?" I called out over the storm. "Not far," he replied, his voice barely audible but unnervingly calm. "Just down the road a piece." Against every instinct in my body, I unlocked the doors. "Get in." He approached slowly, almost deliberately, and slid into the passenger seat. My Toyota's door seals were notoriously finicky, and when he tried to close it the first time, it bounced back open. "Sorry about that," I said, forcing a nervous laugh. "You've got to really slam it. These doors are temperamental." What happened next still gives me chills. He turned his head toward me with an unnaturally slow movement, stared for what felt like an eternity, then finally, after what must have been 10 seconds of uncomfortable silence, reopened the door and slammed it shut with unnecessary force. The way he moved, like he was calculating every gesture, made my stomach turn. I'd already made my mistake, but it was too late to turn back now. I accelerated back onto Riverside Drive, pushing my speed to 65 in a 45 zone. The sooner I got this guy to wherever he was going, the better. "So, how far did you say you needed to go?" I asked, trying to fill the suffocating silence. Several beats passed before he answered. "Just a few miles ahead." I reached for the radio dial, desperate to break the tension, but something stopped me. Call it intuition, call it fear, but I left the radio off. That's when I noticed it in my peripheral vision. He had turned his head and was staring directly at me. Not glancing, staring. The kind of intense, unwavering gaze that feels like it's boring into your soul. For nearly 2 miles, I felt his eyes on me. I kept my arm locked on the road ahead, my knuckles white on the steering wheel, telling myself this would be over soon. Just get him to his destination and never pick up another hitchhiker again. Finally, he turned away, and I thought I could breathe again. But then he spoke, and his words made my blood run cold. "You know," he said in that same eerily calm voice, "I've been thinking lately about whether it's all worth it. Living, I mean." I shot him a confused glance. "What do you mean?" He reached into his jacket pocket. "I've been carrying this around for about a month now, wondering when I'd finally work up the courage." The knife he pulled out was moss of a hunting blade with a black handle that gleamed dully in the dashboard light. My heart hammered against my ribs as every muscle in my body tensed. "Hey, put that away," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "Whatever's going on, we can talk about it." He looked at me with those dead, emotionless eyes. "Pull over by that reflector post up ahead." I wanted to refuse, wanted to floor the accelerator and race toward the nearest police station, but the knife was now pointing in my direction. With trembling hands, I guided the car to the shoulder next to a weathered mile marker. What happened next will haunt me until the day I die. He rolled up his sleeve, revealing old scars crisscrossing his forearm, and began to cut himself again. Fresh blood welled up as he let out a sound half moan, half sigh that seemed to come from somewhere deep and broken inside him. "You need to get out of my car right now," I managed to say, my voice barely a whisper. He looked up from his bleeding arm and said, "No, you get out. There's something behind that post I want to show you." When I hesitated, he raised the knife higher, close enough that I could see my reflection in the blade. "Just for a minute. There's something you need to see." I knew I was staring death in the face, but I also knew I had to be smart if I wanted to live through this. "Okay," I said, raising my hand slowly. I opened my door deliberately, making sure to leave it wide open, and stepped out with my hands visible. He followed, coming around to my side of the car. The rain had stopped, but the silence was somehow more terrifying than the storm. The moment he stepped directly behind my car, the exact instant when the Toyota's bulk blocked his path to me, I lunged back into the driver's seat, slammed the door, and floored the accelerator. The last thing I saw in my rearview mirror was his figure standing motionless in the red glow of my taillights, that knife still in his hand. I made it home to my apartment in 8 minutes, hands shaking so badly I could barely turn the key in the lock. I sat on my couch until dawn, afraid to sleep, afraid to close my eyes and see that emotionless stare again. That was 4 months ago, and I still take a different route home from work. If you ever see someone hitchhiking on a lonely road in the dead of night, don't slow down. Don't roll down your window. Don't let misplaced compassion override your survival instincts. Just keep driving. Some strangers are meant to stay that way. What started as an ordinary Saturday night celebration would become a terrifying game of survival that still haunts me to this day. Just 4 months after celebrating my 17th birthday in 2008, I finally got my hands on Freedom, a slightly beaten-up 2001 Honda Civic that represented everything I'd dreamed of. Little did I know that this car would play a crucial role in one of the most terrifying nights of my life. It was a humid Saturday evening when Marcus called with an invitation that seemed too good to pass up. Dylan Patterson, a guy from our school who lived in one of the bigger houses on Millbrook Road, was throwing what everyone was calling the party of the summer. Living in the rural outskirts of North Carolina meant that massive parties were rare gems, and when one happened, it was as if the entire county's youth population materialized out of nowhere. Since I knew I'd be in no condition to drive the Civic home afterward, Marcus, his girlfriend Jessica, and I decided to carpool. The Patterson house sat about 7 minutes down Millbrook Road, a winding 2-lane highway that snaked through dense pine forests. I knew Dylan casually from school, but wouldn't call us friends. Still, when you live in a place where excitement is scarce, you don't turn down an invitation to the social event of the season. The drive there was routine, the same familiar stretch of asphalt cutting through towering trees, with scattered houses appearing like lonely sentinels before disappearing back into the woodland darkness. Dylan's house was modest, like most homes in our area, but the party had spilled entirely into the backyard. With the nearest neighbors living nearly a mile away, noise complaints weren't exactly a concern. The party itself was everything we'd expected: loud music, too many people, and the kind of reckless energy that only comes from teenagers finally getting a taste of freedom. But then disaster struck. Around midnight, Jessica received a frantic call. A family emergency required her immediate attention, and she had to leave taking our ride with her. Marcus assured me it wasn't a problem, that we'd easily find another way home. Famous last words. Fast forward 3 hours and several drinks later, I could barely maintain my balance. My watch read 2:47 a.m., and the party was winding down. Time to find Marcus and get out of there. But Marcus was nowhere to be found. In fact, as I stumbled around the rapidly emptying backyard, I realized that everyone I knew had vanished. The realization hit me like a physical blow. Marcus had actually left without me. Fury and disbelief warred in my alcohol-clouded mind as I borrowed Dylan's phone and tried calling Marcus's house twice. No answer. Standing on Dylan's front porch, staring down the dark tunnel of Millbrook Road, I made what would prove to be a catastrophically poor decision. I started walking home. The night air was thick and oppressive, filled with the sound of crickets and my own unsteady footsteps on the asphalt. In my condition, I estimated the walk would take at least 45 minutes, maybe longer. After what felt like an eternity but was probably only 20 minutes, I heard the most beautiful sound in the world: the low hum of an approaching engine. Headlights appeared in the distance, growing brighter as they approached. I immediately stuck out my thumb, practically bouncing with relief as the vehicle slowed and pulled over. It was a dark-colored 2000 Chevy Tahoe, and when the driver rolled down his window, I nearly cried with gratitude. "Where you headed, son?" the man asked. His voice was pleasant enough, maybe in his 40s, with graying hair visible in the dashboard light. "Just down the road," I replied, probably slurring every word. "Past the big curve near Oakwood Drive." He chuckled a sound that seemed friendly at the time. "Hop in." I thanked him profusely and climbed into the passenger seat, exhaustion washing over me immediately. The man tried making conversation, but I was fighting to stay conscious. The combination of alcohol, exhaustion, and relief created a perfect storm of vulnerability. And then I passed out. When I came to, the truck was still moving, but something was wrong. Terribly wrong. The landscape outside the window was completely unfamiliar, no longer the familiar pine forests of Millbrook Road, but flat, empty fields stretching into darkness. "Oh, where are we going?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Instead of answering, the man looked at me with an expression I couldn't quite read in the dim light. "So what were you doing out so late anyway?" The way he deflected my question with his own sent ice water through my veins. The alcohol fog began lifting, replaced by crystal clear terror. You can let me out anywhere," I stammered. "No." That single word delivered with such casual finality made my stomach lurch. And then it literally did lurch. The combination of fear, alcohol, and the realization of my predicament triggered an immediate and violent physical reaction. I started gagging, and the man instinctively looked over, his attention dividing between me and the road ahead. In that moment, I saw my opportunity. I turned toward him, continuing to retch dramatically, and he began leaning away from me while slowing the vehicle. Then I let nature take its course explosively and all over his lap. The man erupted in a string of curses, immediately pulling over and stopping the truck. "Get out! Get out!" he screamed. I didn't need to be told twice. I bolted from the vehicle and crashed through the undergrowth lining the road, diving behind a cluster of thick bushes just as I heard his door slam shut. My heart hammered against my ribs as I crouched in the darkness, trying to control my breathing. The man's footsteps crunched through the brush, and I could see the beam of his flashlight sweeping back and forth. Twice that beam passed directly over my hiding spot without detecting me. After what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes, I heard his footsteps moving deeper into the woods, away from the road. This was my chance. I sprinted back toward the Tahoe, praying he'd left it unlocked. No such luck. But just as despair began setting in, I spotted headlights approaching from the distance. Without thinking, I ran directly into the middle of the road, waving my arms frantically. The car's small sedan tried to swerve around me, but I positioned myself to block their path. They had no choice but to stop. I shouted through their window, "That man in the truck, he kidnapped me! Please, I need help!" The elderly couple inside looked terrified, but after I explained what had happened, they agreed to drive me home. Not to the police station, just home. I was too shaken, and still too intoxicated to think clearly about what I should do next. When I finally stumbled through my front door at nearly 5 a.m., I immediately woke my parents. After hearing my story, my father's first question was about the license plate number. I wanted to disappear into the floor. In all the chaos, I'd failed to get the most basic piece of information that could have led to the man's capture. All I could tell them was that he drove a dark-colored 2000 Chevy Tahoe. The next day, I confronted Marcus about abandoning me. His casual dismissal of the situation created a rift between us that never fully healed. I haven't spoken to him in over 6 years now, and honestly, I'm not sure I ever want to. For the longest time, I tried to push that night out of my mind. It had been nearly 2 years since I'd even thought about it. But writing this account has brought every terrifying detail flooding back: the smell of the truck's interior, the sound of footsteps in the brush, the overwhelming relief of seeing those headlights approach. Some memories fade with time, but others remain as vivid as the night they were made. This is one that will stay with me forever, a reminder that sometimes the difference between a close call and a tragedy is nothing more than quick thinking and sheer luck. The man in the Tahoe was never found. He's still out there somewhere.